If you're building an app, there's a good chance that at some point you'll want to convert your users into paying customers. The most popular API for doing just that is Stripe. It's the payment solution behind a huge number of successful startups and companies like Twitch, Squarespace, and Shopify, just to name a few. Stripe has multiple JavaScript libraries that you can implement in the front end to easily collect credit card information from your customers. In today's video, you'll learn how to use both Stripe Checkout and Stripe Elements in an Angular application. If you're new here, like and subscribe, and you can grab the full source code on Fireship.io. Now, the first thing I want to point out is that this video is only covering the front-end implementation. That involves securely collecting credit card information from the user and then validating it with Stripe, but it does not involve creating the actual charge that will collect money from the user. For that, you need a backend implementation, and if you're using Firebase, that means Firebase Cloud Functions. Luckily, I just released my full-length Stripe Payments Master course, and it will show you how to implement and test everything on the back end, as well as integrate it with Firebase. The course will show you how to build a full-stack payment solution similar to the one I have on Fireship.io that handles single charges, subscriptions, coupons, and more. But enough of that shameless plug, let's get into our Angular application and start writing some code. We're going to start with Stripe Checkout, which is very easy to implement and does almost all the front-end work for you. When the user clicks on this buy button, it will trigger this pop-up modal, which will then collect their credit card information and do all the validation directly in that modal. This is great as a drop-in solution, but it doesn't give you a lot of flexibility to customize the styling or the entire checkout experience. Now, at this point, I want to make it clear that I'm using Firebase in this project. It's not at all required to work with Stripe and Angular, but I want to show you what a real charge looks like. So in order to do that, I've implemented user authentication in this app, as well as Firebase callable functions. As you can see, I have those dependencies in my app module via the Angular Fire library. One other thing you'll probably want to do is install the types for either Stripe Checkout or Stripe.js, just so you have autocomplete in your IDE as you're writing your code. From there, we'll go into Angular to the index.html file, and then add the script for Stripe Checkout. Stripe recommends including this as a script tag in the HTML as opposed to including it in your JavaScript bundle. Now, I've created a component called Checkout, and the first important thing I'll do is declare a namespace for Stripe Checkout in the top of this file. And you can strong type it if you installed the typings that I showed you earlier. Then I'm adding my auth service and Angular Fire functions to the constructor. That's not required for Stripe Checkout, and you can replace that with nothing or with your own logic. Now, there's a good chance you have more than one product, so we'll add input properties here to pass in an amount and also a description for the product being sold. Then we'll declare a handler, which is the actual modal window that the user will enter their credit card details in. Then I'm also going to show you a confirmation of an actual charge from Stripe, and we'll set a loading state to false. We can define the handler during ng on init, and we do that by calling Stripe Checkout configure. And at this point, you'll need to pass it your Stripe publishable key. You can find that by going to the Stripe dashboard under Developers API keys. There's a bunch of different options that you can pass in here to customize things like the avatar image and things like that. But the important thing is that you define a callback for either the source or the token. When the user enters their payment details, they will be securely transferred to Stripe, and then Stripe will respond back to your front end with a tokenized version of the payment source or credit card. So the code we write here will run after the user has entered their card details, Stripe has validated that card, and now we can use it to actually create a charge on our own server. There's quite a few things that you'll want to do here. First, we'll set the loading state to true, and then we'll get the currently authenticated user. The backend that we build in the Stripe Master course is based on Firebase callable functions. This is a special type of HTTP function that gives us the context of the currently authenticated user. This means we can make requests to our backend without having to set authorization headers manually. In this case, we just need to pass a source and an amount, and our backend will charge the card. That will take a second or two, and then we'll go ahead and set the loading state to false, and that's all it takes to create a charge from our backend. The only thing left to do is create a method here called checkout that will open the handler when the user clicks a button. You can also add additional details here. For example, you might want to add the user's email address and the amount and description of the product. We can also close the handler manually, and we'll want to do that if the user clicks the back button by adding a host listener to the window pop state event. In the HTML, we'll just go ahead and create a button, and then we'll bind the click event to that checkout handler. Now, when creating the amount for a Stripe charge, it will always be in the currency's smallest denomination, which for US dollars would be pennies. And that's why I divide the amount by 100, so we have the actual dollar amount to show in the UI. And then I'll add ngIf here for the loading state and also for the confirmation that we get back from our backend. Now, when a customer goes online to buy some meat from our store, they have a modal to enter their credit card details that is not only secure, but also looks pretty nice. After the card is captured, it will run the code in that callback. It first puts the app in the loading state for a few seconds, then it responds with a charge object from Stripe, which has all kinds of information about the charge itself, like the ID, the amount, and stuff like that. So overall, that was very easy, and we created a real charge in the Stripe testing environment. But the main drawback to Stripe Checkout is that we don't have a lot of control over the checkout experience. We can change the logo and some of the options, but everything else is basically hard-coded into that modal. Luckily, Stripe has another library called Stripe Elements that allows you to build checkout forms without having to do everything from scratch. We use Stripe Elements on Fireship, and as you can see here, we get the same validation and security that we get with the checkout form. However, it is a lot easier to customize, and as you can see here, it easily adapts to multiple themes. And it's really not that much more difficult to set up. So first we're going to go into the index.html, and this time import Stripe.js version 3. We'll declare a global variable for Stripe, and this time the typings are under the Stripe namespace. Now the component will start off just like the previous one did. We pass in the amount and the product description, but then we need to grab a DOM element to attach the payment form to. So viewchild will be looking for a template reference called card element, which we'll create once we get to the HTML. Now we have a few things to declare here. We have the instance of Stripe Elements itself, we have the card that represents the actual card details, and then any card errors. And then we'll also have a loading state and a confirmation from our backend. Now you can initialize Stripe with your publishable key, and then Stripe Elements will give you access to a bunch of different form fields. If you just have a generic credit card form, you can create the card element and that's all you need. That'll give you a nice single line for the card itself, but you can break that down into multiple fields if you want. From here, we'll go ahead and mount the card to the actual DOM element, which we do by calling card element native element in Angular. At this point, we need to attach an event listener to changes to the card form. In this example, we're just going to display the card errors, but you might also want to disable the submit button if the card is not valid. When it comes to Stripe Elements, we need to handle the actual submission of the payment form. Unlike the previous example where we defined a source callback, this time we'll actually call Stripe create source and then handle it inside this async function. If there are any errors, then we'll go ahead and show those in the view. Otherwise, we're going to run the same exact logic that we ran in that source handler, which involves getting the current user, calling the callable function to create the charge in the backend, and then setting the loading state to false. Now we can switch over to the HTML, and first we'll create a form element, and then we'll bind the handle form method to the submission of this form. Then we'll create a div with hashtag card element that creates the template variable that we can actually mount to, and then we'll also display the card errors here as well. And that's all it takes to build a validated and secure payment form with Stripe and Angular. Now we can just drop this component anywhere in our Angular app, and we have a quick and easy way for users to pay for products or sign up for subscriptions. I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up there. If this video helped you, please like and subscribe. And if you're serious about building a payment system with Stripe, consider becoming a pro member at Fireship.io. I'm leaving a discount code down in the description, and if you have any questions, make sure to leave me a comment. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you soon.